Is social media and dopamine actually threatening the future of sports? Hey guys, my name is Maddie and I'm the founder of Digital Exodus and the author of The Social Media Mess. My passion in life is helping people log off social media and discover a life offline, discover a better balance with their social media usage. And that is my heart behind creating Digital Exodus, which is a company that provides resources for people, teenagers, younger people, moms to log off social media and live. Today, we're going to be talking about a super interesting topic, and that topic is this question. What if the biggest threat to athletes and the future of athleticism isn't necessarily genetics, but dopamine? Are we training the next generation of athletes or frying their motivational circuits? And is TikTok quietly changing who becomes great at sports? Because dopamine isn't just about performance, it's about motivation, resilience, and reward. So let's talk for a second about what dopamine actually does in your brain. So dopamine is an incredible chemical in your brain and your body that is called the feel-good chemical. You feel good when you produce dopamine, and you're likely spending time with friends, you're laughing, you're doing hobbies that you like, you're enjoying life. Dopamine regulates motivation, reward processing, learning, stress resilience, and executive function. And the interesting correlation is that elite athletes often show high motivation, emotional stability, and strong goal orientation. They also show resilience under pressure. Dopamine isn't just simply the feel-good chemical in your body. It's the chemical that makes you chase hard things. So now let's ask the question, what happens when your dopamine center, or the center of an athlete in particular, gets hijacked by the infinite scroll that we see on TikTok and Instagram and a lot of other social media sites? So there is quite a difference between how sports develops dopamine in your brain and how social media develops dopamine in your brain. Sports develops dopamine in your brain through delayed reward, through effort, failure, repetition, and mastery, and through long-term discipline. Social media develops dopamine in your brain through instant reward, no physical effort needed whatsoever, and an endless novelty of things that you're scrolling through online. So there's actually a study put out by MDPI, and it's entitled Dopamine in Sports, a Narrative Review on the Genetic and Epigenetic Factors Shaping Personality and Athletic Performance. And it was a study conducted by Kinga Huminska Liauska. I hope I said that right. But this study came out in 2024, and I will attach it actually in the description if you're curious and want to read it. But basically what it does is it goes through and it analyzes the brains of athletes and how they respond to dopamine and how genetics play a factor into it. But the big question that everyone is kind of thinking about that's coming up on the horizon is, because dopamine and social media has affected us so much in our culture. It's shortened our attention span. It's changed our expectation of what everyday real life looks like. Now we're kind of thinking about, okay, what is athleticism going to be? How is that going to affect how athletes train, how their brains are developed, if they will actually put in the time, the effort that it takes to train and be great at something versus just good at something. So we're going to contrast kind of these two brain patterns for a moment, and that's the pattern of the brain of the athlete and the hyper scrolled brain, which is just basically saying the brain that spends a ton of time on social media. So the traditional athlete brain is wired with high consciousness, and these are generalizations, but this is typically kind of what you see: high consciousness, stress resilience, an ability to emotionally regulate really well, and a reward tolerance. You see athletes, they work incredibly hard for a goal that they may not achieve for years. You see this with Olympians, you see this with people who play football. So with the hyper scrolled brain, this is the brain that is, constantly scrolling on social media. You're seeing kind of the backside, the flip side of the athletic brain. You're seeing a lower boredom tolerance. You're seeing faster reward cycles. You're not necessarily working as hard to produce the dopamine in your brain. It's reducing the delayed gratification process that helps you build resilience and tolerance to do hard things. And it's more impulsive than sports can be sometimes. With the rise in esports the last several years, we almost wonder, and this is an open discussion. This isn't something that I've seen a ton of research on yet. It's fairly new. But the question is, are esports rising because of the effect that dopamine is having on the brain? So with esports, you're seeing the same digital stimulation as you would see with social media. There's a fast novelty and there's high dopamine spikes. Traditional sports, on the other hand, provide a little bit less of a reward. There's a delayed gratification and there's long-term repetition. Is our culture shifting towards sports that match our dopamine conditioning? And you might be wondering, why does this matter? What does it matter if a football player scrolls on TikTok after practice, or if a, lacrosse player spends his days on YouTube? But the interesting thing is that dopamine doesn't just affect the way that our brain processes like reward gratification, it also affects our stress resilience. In this study in particular, one of the findings that the researcher Kinga found was that dopamine influences your stress coping, your motivation, and your emotional regulation. So if social media is rising the baseline stimulation and it's shortening our attention spans and it's increasing the stress of comparison, of saying, oh my goodness, look at all these people who are, so perfect and so curated and so put together, and our brain is seeing that, what is going to happen to athletes with their mental toughness? What's going to happen to their resilience under pressure? And what's going to happen to their long-term commitment to something? Is this dopamine threshold actually lowering our discomfort for delayed gratification? And that's one of the things that elite sports actually are built out of. And if we can't overanalyze everything, we can't, micro-diagnose things as they're coming up. But these are the things that we need to be thinking about as this next generation comes along, because of how social media has impacted not only relationships, but the mental health of this culture. It's going to keep impacting things in this ripple effect, and athleticism and athletic performance is going to be one of them. If you're a parent, or if you're thinking of becoming a parent, I want you to think about these questions. When we think about how dopamine is conditioning us to have such a low tolerance for working hard, for paying attention, all of these things, what's going to happen to the 8-year-olds that are being raised on YouTube Shorts? Are they going to struggle with repetition? Are they going to struggle because, things in real life aren't necessarily as easy as they are on social media? Doing the dishes, doing laundry, taking a shower, taking care of your mental health, going for a walk, all of those things require such effort that social media doesn't require to participate in. You can participate in things on social media at a very low effort scale. I mean, you're sitting on the couch and you're literally just scrolling on your phone. And now they even have the feature of auto scroll, so you don't even have to scroll anymore. But then here's the other thing we need to think about. For the children who actually are not raised on phones, are not, say they're raised way out in the sticks and they were never given access to social media, to phones, they were restricted from that. Is that going to change the future of athleticism because they have conditioned the dopamine in their brain to be better, in a sense, than the dopamine that somebody who's, addicted to social media? It almost makes you wonder, are we going to have an entire generation of athletes who are not necessarily what would be considered the best, but they're the most driven? They're the ones that are willing to put in the work. They're the ones that are willing to stay the extra hour. They're the ones that are not sitting doom scrolling on their phone. They're paying attention. They have a long attention span. And then you wonder, what about all these people who are genetically, maybe have athleticism in their genetic pool? Are they going to fry their brain with dopamine and then miss out on the opportunities of delayed gratification, long-term, reward versus risk payoff? That this other group of people who maybe stayed away from social media will have done. Maybe the future of sports won't be determined by genetics, but determined by the people who protect their dopamine. So thank you guys for watching this video. Thank you for following along on this journey. I'm excited to release more content, to have more of these conversations at my kitchen table and talk about the future of how social media is going to affect our generations and what we can do to proactively protect ourselves against that. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.